Hello, everybody. How you doing? Let's get this off the screen. So, welcome, everybody. Welcome to Whining On. My name's Matthew Bowden, the Encouragable Rogue, and today I'm with Lee Hathaway. Lee, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate. Yourself?
Not too bad, mate. Not too
Good.
bad.
No
Nice to
wrong.
see you, pal. And what's that I see in the background? Is that a picture of a television set?
It certainly is. There we go. There's Jonathan Ross, Penn and Teller. Yeah, me on Fool Us. Yep.
There you go. And I'm sure we'll hit that later on in the interview. Did you fool them?
I certainly did. Yes, indeed. So on the very first series, when it was difficult to fool them.
Was that before they got fooled by anyone?
Yeah, well, now they do it. Now they've done it in the States. They've kind of changed the format a bit, but the first series in the UK was tough. All right, a few of my mates, they took all their props apart and they had a real tough time. Yeah.
They allowed you to look at the price. We shouldn't start talking about it now. Let's talk about it later in chronology. I'm getting too interested in this too early.
Cheers, everybody.
So yeah, I said cheers to everyone at home. So I read your bio, and it said on your bio that you first did a magic show at 8 years old. So I'm assuming performing household, performing parents. Is that something parents for something to do with the arts? Is that a fair guess?
No, not at all. Actually, it's funny because I mean I get on well with my parents, but me and my dad couldn't be more further apart in terms of our sort of our nature and that kind of thing. I mean, my dad hates walking into rooms of people he doesn't know, hates speaking in front of people he doesn't know, doesn't even like to pick up the telephone. He's very, very much the introvert to my extrovert in that sense. Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest moments I still recall in my life is when he did a speech at my sister's wedding, because no one could believe he'd actually get up and do it. But I've always I've never been. It's funny, isn't it? People have different fears about things, like people are afraid of heights, people are afraid of, and a lot of people have that fear of performing in front of people or being up in front of people. I've never had that fear, never been frightened of that at all. I mean, I love being on a stage, and I mean, you're a performer, you probably understand that as well. It's just not a frightening thing to me. It never has been, and yet, but some people just go to bits, don't they? I mean, it's amazing. My sister is a psychologist, and people in her profession pay professional entertainers and performers fortunes to learn how to stand up in front of people and talk, because it's something that's really frightening for so many people, and yet I suppose when you do it naturally, you don't really worry about what's not. I mean, yeah, if you're doing a set or something, then you're worried if you haven't rehearsed your material correctly, or if you don't know what you're going to do, if you're going to screw up. But so I'll say screw up. Is that am I allowed to swear on here? I don't know.
Yeah. You can say fuck if you just screw up. Yeah, it's fine.
But yeah, so no, my dad was a postman, and he was a postman for 30 years. Never did any other job. Sort of got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Used to go down to Mount Pleasant. Retired after 30 years. Yeah, sort of. Not a 9, well, say 9 to 5, but it wasn't really, because it was sort of early in the morning up to about 3 in the afternoon. Yeah, but and I'm very much opposite to that. I've never wanted a normal job in my life. I don't think I'll ever have one.
Why do a magic show when you're 8 then? Is it just something you stumbled upon? Did you get the Paul? I can't believe I forgot his name now. The famous TV magician in the 80s and 90s, Paul.
Well, there was Paul Daniels, and then for a few years in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, there was Wayne Dobson, who was brilliant, who's now a mate of mine actually, but sadly got MS, so he wasn't able to continue his career. But as you may well know, so they were the two sort of big influences. It's really interesting actually when you see nowadays the magicians of my generation that perform, and how much of our style is influenced by those people, because there was no internet. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have all the the YouTube and all the different people you could watch. Literally, your understanding of magic was Paul Daniels. That's what you knew magic to be, and that's what most people sort of knew as a magician. I remember trying to perform magic in the late 90s, just as I started sort of doing performances and professional and that. And a lot of people used to say, "Oh, I don't like magicians." You used to get that from a lot of people, is, "I don't like magicians." And what they meant was, "I don't like Paul Daniels," because that's the only magician they knew, So they'd seen Paul Daniels sort of be quite, if you've ever seen him perform, he's quite sharp and quick-witted and sort of, used to make people look a bit silly and that sort of thing, and and sort of always have the upper hand, But that style of performance from Daniels came from the fact that he came from working in working men's clubs where he needed to be like that, and he needed to be quite quick and put you down quite quickly because he had a really tough crowd every night, So, and that's where you saw his style develop, and that's why, and that's what sort of people's perception of a magician was Paul Daniels. It wasn't anybody else. So I kind of I got into magic from about 8 years old. I don't think I did a show when I was 8 years old. I sort of got into it from about that age. But I was always doing little shows and sort of asking, parents and my sister and that, can I show you a trick, and that sort of thing.
And was it just that you saw it on television and you thought, oh, I really enjoy this? Or was there a moment, was there an instance which sparked it?
I don't know. I can always remember being fascinated by magic. I mean, I can remember, from as early as I can remember, I can always remember being fascinated by magic. Whether if I was at a kid's party or a friend's party, or there was a holiday park, my parents used to take us to like Pontins and Butlins and all that sort of stuff, but if there was any opportunity to watch a magician, I just loved it. And I used to like, even things like the old, the silly breakaway wand where the wand falls down in pieces, and that sort of thing, used to fascinate me. I mean, I used to, and I don't know what it, I don't know what it is that meant so much to me then as a kid, but there was something about this sort of idea that you can make anything possible, and if you knew those secrets, then you could somehow, do anything, and make anything possible. And it was like, I used to get sort of like a buzz and excitement when I saw magic, which I don't think, people enjoy it when they're youngsters and that, but I don't think they get that same real buzz, And for me, it was like a real, I wouldn't even say it was a hobby, it was like an obsession, a real passion. I just wanted to know everything I could about magic, And
were you excited by the mysteries? If you saw something you didn't understand, did you go, right, how does this work? And try.
Hi, Nathan, how you doing? Well, actually, it wasn't quite like that, Matt, because it was really difficult when I learnt magic. It was really difficult as a kid, to try and get any information about magic. It was quite closed, and because I learned magic when there was no internet, and so the only access you really had to it was you had like the Paul Daniels magic sets, which had sort of very basic tricks in them, and there was a couple of books at my local library, and that was it really, and I could ask, and then, occasionally my parents and that would buy me some other books, but it was really tough to kind of find out much information about, I can remember not even being able to buy. I wanted a magic wand with white tips, just a black magic wand with white tips, and not knowing where to buy one, and not being able to find one anywhere. And the idea that as a kid you can do that now sounds extraordinary, but because now you just go on the internet and go, magic tip, blah, 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 there it is, but I can remember sitting home and making one with a bit of wooden dowel because I couldn't buy one anywhere, But
was there not a distributor like Davenport's was? I mean,
but you never. Well, Davenport's. Well, here's the thing. You see, I read several magic books, but Davenport's, you had to know it was there. If you didn't know it was there, no one's going to tell you. And I think when I was about maybe 10 or 11, I got a magic book, which I've still got. It's just in the other room here. Peter Eldon's Book of Magic, and in the back of it had the address of Davenport's. And that was kind of like my door to the magic world. I mean, I went to Davenport's and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's like this whole magical kingdom of stuff, and they had, at the time, the Young Magicians Club, which is the youth initiative of the Magic Circle, didn't. Hi, Nathan. Nathan said hi on the thing, by the way.
Hey, Nathan.
That didn't exist. So there was no Young Magicians Club, but they used to have a thing called the Demon Club at Davenport's Magic Studio every Saturday for the youngsters. And there was me and about sort of 20 other guys that turned up every Saturday through the sort of late 80s, through the 90s. All of whom are now professional magicians, and we used to go there and hang out on a Saturday, and I'd go down every Saturday. I'd go down to Charing Cross Station and hang out in the afternoon, spend my pocket money on a trick or two, and then come back, maybe go for some McDonald's over the road at the McDonald's on the Strand, come up to Covent Garden, which is sort of where I got my introduction to Covent Garden as well. I used to come up and watch the performers in Covent Garden, and then
Can we just touch upon the first time you went to Covent Garden? What you saw, what you thought of it?
Yeah, well, actually, the first time I went to Covent Garden, was a few years before, probably 2 or 3 years before that. I had a schoolmate called Michael Smith, and his mum took us there one time, and I can only really remember, and so that was sort of before I got into magic and that, and all I can remember was watching the street show, which I loved, and I've tried to piece that back, and I'm pretty sure it was Phil actually, because that when I remember the show now, and I know Phil's show, with the rope tied between the two things, and and all the, and that sort of, Phil's bottling speech from the bottom of my heart, guys, from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, it's like an Oscar speech, people crying.
Guys, from the bottom of my heart, I love him. He's a lovely man, and but I think it was Phil I probably saw. That was when I was a kid, and then. So and then after that, I think the first time I went, the times I went to Covent Garden after that was when I sort of started watching the performers, and of course got to know very well Marina. Do you remember Marina? Yeah, Marina, who had the magic stall there originally.
No, you see, I was in Covent Garden from I think 2004 or something like that.
Oh, okay. So when you were there, yeah, I had the stall then, yeah. But before that, Marina had it, South African lady, for a good sort of 15, 20 years. So I took it over from Marina. Yeah. I'm surprised you don't know Marina. She's fabulous.
Okay.
I went, she's wonderful. She had her 60th birthday party recently. She doesn't look any older. She just never ages. Incredible person. But so
painting somewhere in the loft.
yeah. So I went to so I used to go and hang out with her and watch the performers in Covent Garden and that, and obviously go to the Demon Club every Saturday. And it's funny actually, because do you know that and I used to love it. I mean, that's where I learned, a lot of my magic skills and that, and met other magicians, and sort of that opened the door to, finding out there was other magic shops like Alan Allen's Magic Spot, which was like a little, an amazing shop on Shaftesbury Avenue, and it was such an incredible shop. And if you spoke to anyone that ever visited it, it was amazing. It was this little sort of old man called Alan Allen, who at one point in his life was a very famous escapologist who taught David Copperfield and that, and he used to sit there with a safety pin through his head and chain smoking cigarettes, everything's covered in nicotine, and there were piles of boxes all behind him everywhere with things like exploding rats written on them, and disappearing slime and stuff like that. And there were piles of them, jumping matchboxes, and all handwritten, and there were manuscripts and books everywhere, and the whole place was covered in crap. And it was, I mean, the best way I think I've ever described it, if you can imagine sort of like a magic shop from, if there was like a junkyard magic shop in Harry Potter and you made it in real life, that's what it would be like. It was something out of a fairy tale. It was an incredible place, and any kids that went in there always, whatever you asked for, he'd go and look in the window, But if you went in and you showed some interest in magic, he taught me loads of stuff. But that's because I asked the right questions. You know what I mean? And then he could tell I really wanted to know. I mean, still now, I'll use the term. So just just in case there are any non-magicians watching, but I'll use the term TT, but I'm sure you probably know what I mean. But Alan Allen, that's one of the most widely used magic props, and Alan Allen taught me how to use that, and I still use the techniques now that he taught me in the shop nearly 30 years ago. So that was another place I found as well, and then obviously, and Davenport's as well, which I used to go down. But that's what I was going to say to you, was that I still now. Do you know, on the Northern Line, when you come into Charing Cross, and there's it's all black and white, isn't it? And there's those murals on the, those black and white murals on the side of the thing. It's quite distinctive as a tube station, because you come in, and they were there 30 years ago. They never changed those. But every time I come into Charing Cross, even now, anytime I'm on the Northern Line, and I see those black and white murals, I still get a little buzz of excitement, because that's like from being a kid, and
Pavlovian.
Yeah, and that kind of, those murals and that sign used to remind me of, I'm here, I'm at my magic space, and I still get that even when I go through Charing Cross now, all these years later. Yeah.
And so when you're doing all of this, you're excited by the magic, the process of doing it, but do you have your mind of being an entertainer sort of as a profession, as a lifetime profession at this point? Is that something you're conceiving of? Are you cognizant that you might do that?
No, not at all. I mean, no. I mean, I don't think I ever thought I would do magic for a living, you know, until much later on in my life. You know, I think even when, because it just wasn't a thing that you did. You know, it wasn't really you know, and bear in mind that I didn't really know there was sort of, you know, you could do close-up magic, you could do corporate entertainment, you could travel abroad, you could do cruises. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was, you know, you're either Paul Daniels or you're a bloke that does magic tricks. You know what I mean? They're the two options. You know, it's like, you know,
Paul Daniels or somebody's uncle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, that those were in my mind the two options. You know, so and also, yeah, I mean, you know, as I say, I came from a sort of you know, my mum and dad are great, but you know, but they're not. No one in my family's a performer. They don't see it as a sort of normal job in any, you know, way, shape, or form. It's like, you know, I mean, my dad, you know, it was like, you know, you did an A level, or you went to college, or you know, you got a 9-to-5 job or something. So it was never.
So did you go to college or get an A level or get? No, you didn't.
No, I went and did magic.
So how did you get to the point of doing it then? So you're a teenager, you're learning all this stuff.
Funny enough, just to backtrack slightly on that, because I remember in my very early days when I was sort of learning magic and I was going to Covent Garden, I worked for Marina demonstrating magic, and I had. And it was a real struggle for.
Hang on a minute. You worked for a demonstrating magic. Can you go into a bit more? Why would she need you to demonstrate magic for her? What was you doing as a job?
Well, she had a magic and joke stall there. So Marina had a magic and joke stall. The one that's still there now. I bought it off her, and then I sold it to a guy called Ashley. I had it with a guy called Neil Henry for about 8 years. But prior to that, Marina had it. And she used to demonstrate like the dynamic coin trick and the Svengali decks and all the jokes and novelties and that. And I used to hang around the stall a lot and got to know her. So I got a little job sort of working for her, you know, a couple of days a week and that, demonstrating the magic and selling it, you know. And
you'd use this as a way to sell it to people. You'd show the effect, I assume. And then once people had seen the effect, you'd then sell them the trick so they could do the effect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She used to give little lessons. So you'd then teach them, like if it was a child or something, you know, you then give them a little lesson on how to do the trick and make sure they could go away and do it. Yeah. You know, and the popular sort of still, even nowadays, there's still the same sort of popular effects that get sold, sort of dynamic coins, Svengali deck, that kind of thing, you know. So yeah, I went and when I was about, I think sort of 16, 17, I was sort of started to go and hang out at the Magic Circle, and I met an agent called John Gordon, who gave me my first sort of ever gigs, and they were Jongleurs Jongleurs comedy club. Do you remember Jongleurs? Yeah. So I mean, Jongleurs were massive at the time. They only had 2 venues. They had Camden, Battersea, and then they opened one in Bow as well. But so I used to go and work in Jongleurs at the weekend, doing warm up around the tables. This is like 17 years old, and then at Christmas, I was doing their Jongleurs Christmas parties, which was sort of almost every night in the run up to Christmas. And I was getting 150 quid a night for it.
That's all right.
At 17 years old. And I was like, you know, we're going back nearly sort of 25, 30 years now. I was also getting to stand in the dressing room with, like, you know, the likes of sort of Bill Bailey and Lee Evans and Stuart Lee and all these people that are now really famous comedians were then just starting out in their career, you know, and hanging out with those people and watching them on stage, you know, and sort of taking that all in. So that was a real great experience in itself. And I was earning more than my dad at that time, you know, in working at Jongleurs, and that was kind of the time where I thought, oh, maybe I could, you know, maybe there's something in this. I could do it for a living, you know.
Before we just move straight on to that, so is this your first experience of going and performing and doing tables, so to speak?
At that age, yes, it is. Yeah. It was Jongleurs. Yeah.
And so, what are the challenges for people doing that? Well, you learned skills, you've learned little bits. What was the difficulties you had trying to make that work for you?
Well, Jongleurs is a very noisy environment, and people were there to have a Christmas party, or they were out with a group of their mates, so they were having a few drinks. So you had to be quite loud and quite brash, you know. But having said that, I mean, when I look back at the set I used to do then, I mean, it was bloody awful, you know, like when I look at what I do now. But, you know, you can get away with an awful lot by being a cute 17-year-old. Do you know what I mean? You know, that's, you know, you can get away with a hell of a lot on the back of that, you know. And so I used to do well there. I mean, I used to get great reactions and that. But I think a lot of it was, you know, the fact that, you know, there was this young guy and that, you know, as you get older and the looks start to go, you have to actually be good at what you do, mate.
Yeah. You leaves you.
but yeah, so I mean, I used to do, mind you, I used to do cups and balls there, and I still do that sometimes now at tables, you know. But I didn't understand then anything like I understand now about working tables and working different environments and what to do in certain situations, or you know, where the alpha male is on a. Say again, mate. Sorry.
What was the mistakes you think you made as a young person that you wouldn't make now?
I mean, it's so long ago. It's so long ago that I don't. You know, it's tough to try and remember. But I mean, I guess. I don't even. Yeah, I mean that's a really tough question because it's so long ago that I'd have to go back and look at. You don't
have to give specific examples, but if you were to try and think of some things, so if young people are doing it, they might be able to draw some experience from what you did, so they don't have to start.
I see. Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, you know, one thing I mean, at the time I had the energy to do it, but one thing I would say is I used to put so much effort and energy into every single table and really try and be loud on that, you know, and by the end of the night I was absolutely knackered, you know, and you can, you don't necessarily need to do that. You can pace yourself a bit more, you know, and take your time. And I was sort of really in your face, you know, and so I think just calm down, you know, maybe just calm down a bit and sort of not try and feel like you have to rush around and hit every table, you know. But I don't, it's the choice of material. I think is a you know, I changed the material I was doing.
Why?
But because nowadays I know what, you know, I know, for instance, you know, in a loud environment, there's no point in doing anything that's involved because nobody can understand you. They've had a drink, you know, there's no, you know, just do something really silly and visual, you know. I mean, you know, frankly now, if I work jonglers now, I mean, I was doing card tricks like ambitious card and, you know, and trying to do, you know, some really nice close-up routines that I'd learned, you know, and I was doing even cups and balls is quite involved to sort of, you know, with following the balls and that, you know, it's still, you know, if you stuck me in jonglers now, looking back on it, you know, I'd probably go drunk people. I'd swallow a balloon, you know, and then do 2 sponge balls in their hand and a big giant cock. Do you know what I mean? And they'd all go, "Oh, fucking hell, this guy's a legend, fucking hell," you know. That's and you know, and I'd have saved myself, you know, 15 minutes of energy, you know, you know, trying to, but I wouldn't know to do that then. Do you know what I mean? And to be quite honest, probably couldn't have got away with it as a 17-year-old. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you can't really. You know, when you're sort of cute looking 17-year-old, oh, hi guys, can I show you some magic? You know, something like sponge cock and that wouldn't really work. You know, it's like you've got to be a bit older and, you know, so, I mean, I'm just using that as one example, but, you know, that's the sort of thing is I'd know the choice of material to do for those sort of, there's no, you know, don't bother trying to do anything flashy or smart or long-winded because they're not going to, they haven't got the attention span, you know, in those sort of environments. Yeah. But it was a good training ground for me because it was quite a tough crowd, jonglers, and so having learned to perform and do that as a sort of do the tables there, it meant that I was able to go and do places which weren't, you know, which were different to that. But I did sort of have a comeuppance when I got work in I remember a restaurant called what was it, Bradley's. They advertised in, now here's an interesting thing, they advertised in the Stage magazine for a close-up magician they wanted, a very posh restaurant in Swiss Cottage called Bradley's, which was like a sort of boutique bistro type place, and they used to have a few celebs go in there and that, and it was owned by this very incredibly camp guy called Neil, who was Neil and his partner, but he was a very, very good chef. But you know, they advertised in the Stage magazine that they wanted this magician. And I don't know if you remember, actually, I don't know if you were in Covent Garden at the time, but years ago there used to be just opposite the East Piazza, which is the main performing area. at the end of one of those sort of aisles in the hall, there used to be a newsagents at the end of there. Do you remember that at all?
No, yes,
Oh,
I do remember. Yes,
yeah.
little box news.
Yeah, right at the very end there was a newsagents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing about that newsagents was if you're a performer, some performers knew they used to have a queue of actors and performers outside that newsagents on a Wednesday night, and the reason they was there is because that was the only place in London. The offices, the stage were just opposite where they printed the stage, and it was the only place you could get the stage on a Wednesday night. Everywhere else it came out on Thursday. So if you queued up at that newsagents, you could get the jobs before anybody else did.
How funny!
So they advertised for this magician. And I got the stage on a Wednesday night about 6 o'clock, and there was an address up in Swiss Cottage, and I thought, right, I'm going to go and hand post them a letter, saying I'm really interested in it. So of course I went and posted it, and I got a phone call from him because they thought, oh, this is the only person that's bothered to apply, the next day. So I got that job. But anyway, the reason I mentioned that is because I had my comeuppance there because I went into Bradley's and I was all very much, hey guys, right, come on, let's do this. And he was like, Lee, you've got to calm down a bit. It's just not that type of restaurant, it's like, and so, but that was the performing style I'd learned, that was kind of, I was really in there and in your face, and now I know that kind of restaurant where people are trying to have a conversation, it's more, oh, hi guys, good evening. Been asked to do a bit of entertainment for you, and it's totally different, So I learned all that.
To deal with heads.
I used to go, banging my fist on the table. Right, guys, the magic's starting. Here we go.
But it's interesting, isn't it? How you have to adapt your delivery for a different place and for a different setting. Very few people I know have a sort of one character fits all kind of toolbox.
No, well, absolutely, especially with especially with close up where it's interactive, but also even with crowds as well. Do you know what I mean? No, I mean that is definitely the skill of a performer, whether whatever you do. If you're talking to an audience or to a group of people, it's trying to find a level. And that, I mean, now I know, and I'm sure you must do this as well, and I know many other performers do it. But now I know if I go to a gig, let's say it's a Black Tie or something at Grosvenor House, I've now got in the first sort of 30 seconds of what I do, I've got, oh, Nathan's just said I remember Bradley's in Winchester Road. That's right, yeah. I didn't think you were that old, Nathan, to remember that. Bloody hell. No, but going back to what I said, I've now got 2 or 3 gags and bits of business that I drop in the first 30 seconds. And the reason they're there is not just to get a laugh and to get a bit of banter. It's because those things tell me what the level of the crowd I'm playing to, and what gags I can do and what bits I can do going on from there. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure we've all got those things in our set.
I believe they call them in stand-up testers.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, testers, little testers, and it's like, and if you don't get, and you make, do a little gag and an innuendo, and if it's all blank, you go, right, okay, that's that and out, or you start having more banter with them, don't you? So there's all those things that tell you. Whereas when I first started working jonglers, I mean, you were asking me about what mistakes I made. I don't know if it was necessarily mistakes, because if I'd known I was making a mistake, I probably wouldn't have made it. It's probably just more naivety of not understanding those kind of things that you learn, when with experience, So you can, test the water and work out what sort of audience you're playing to. I mean, I used to go in at jonglers and it was like, I want to perform magic and I want to perform for these people. And I'm going to walk up to the table and hey guys, right, here's what I'm doing, and just do my set, Whereas now, every time I go up to a group of people, and you learn this doing close up a lot, it's like you're clocking and working out who those people are, who'd be good to steal a watch off, who's, what sort of person that is, you're working all that out. I never used to consider any of that when I started, it was only
if I'm right in thinking this, you don't have the context to consider that. So that comes from years and years of understanding how people react in these very controlled circumstances that you're in, that most people aren't in most of their life, delivering magic to a group of people. You understand the dynamic that they respond to you, so you can then sit and figure and plan and work stuff around that. Young you is just delivering prepared material, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, as a and that's why I always say to youngsters that want to learn magic, or anyone that wants to learn magic, and as a street performer, if you want to get good at something, and comedians as well, if you want to just go out and do it night after night, over and over again, and keep doing it. And you can sit in your bedroom and practice magic, till the cows come home, but you'll get really good when you go out and perform it again and again and again, because you can't learn those things sat in your bedroom. It's like you can't learn the quick quips and the, and what audience is going to do. I know, if someone, let's say, even things as basic nowadays as, if someone chooses a card, right, and they put it back, right, I know they're going to try and miscall the card, right? They haven't said anything, they haven't done anything, right? They haven't just, it's like I've done that so many times that I can tell from just the way they put it back that they're going to miscall the card, and it's weird because it's almost like they don't even know they're going to do it yet. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's like a kind of, it's not a sixth sense of psychic. It's just having done that job so often. I mean, it's it is that sort of having eyes in the back of your head when you've got a crowd when you're street performing. It's like, you suddenly you can think, oh, that kid might run out in a minute. Do you know what I mean? Or or he looks like he might be a bit, and you're picking up on all those things, aren't you? And it's like, and that's just from having done that job so often. Is you're aware of all those dynamics around you. Yeah.
Well, for the street, one of the things I particularly like is I know some of the responses people do, and you can lead people down very, very dark cul-de-sacs where they'll dig holes themselves because they're going to take this bit of bait because you've done it so many times before.
Yeah.
What was your experience working on the street? You work in a magic shop in Covent Garden. You must have been to James Street and done some of your clothes from the street. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah.
And so what was it like?
I loved doing street performing. I learned a hell of a lot about audiences and audience management and just and general confidence within. I mean, it's a great thing to do. Anyone that's sort of relentlessly done street performing inevitably becomes a better performer. There's no doubt about it. And it's such a great skill to have. And one of the things I liked about not so much just learning magic, but street performing in particular. When I started, as I think for all of us, you start and it's like I think you need decent material, but it's much more, and you learn from other performers. It's much more about the construction of a show, and building your front edge and doing your hat lines and and all that sort of thing, And when you get, and you get better and better at it, and you start to banter with people and that, and suddenly you find your hat money goes up, and that's. And all those sort of things, and eventually you feel like, okay, now I've got, now I can actually do street performing. And one of the lovely feelings about it is there's kind of a lovely feeling of sort of freedom in the sense you go, well, I'm never going to be skinned. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's like well, yeah, I know. Yeah, how wrong could I be, Matt?
I thought the same thing. So
no, but there is that nice feeling of like, of. Doesn't matter where I am in the world, if I've got a deck of cards, I can stand on a street corner and make some money, and it's like.
I was chatting with a very experienced street performer and magician, and he asked me to ask you a question, specifically about close-up and street performance, and he said he found it very interesting. He said, "How do you integrate close-up into street performance effectively?"
Well, I mean, I wonder. I mean, I suppose he's asking that from the point of view of the fact that you can't necessarily do close up very much. You want to do it for a larger crowd as such. So how do you do something close up for a bigger crowd? I mean, first of all, you can. I used to use close up, and I know many other performers do as well. On a table as a way of actually building a crowd. So you start doing close up, you start doing some card stuff, you get 8 or 10 people around you, then you move them out a little bit, and you go, right, guys, we're going to start the big stuff now, and there's your front edge. You know what I mean? You draw a few people in. So that was one way in which I used to use close up, in a street performing environment. But the other thing you can do is a lot of, it's the same kind of question as, what do you do? Close up could be me sat with 2 or 3 people around a table, watching something here, right? Whereas if you go to a banquet, or if you go to, some sort of do's and that, sometimes they've got tables of 6 people this side, 10 people this side, so you're then doing more of a parlor thing. So I think it's also about understanding what close-up effects you can do that you can play up here. So for example, a good example is invisible deck, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with the effect, but some people watching might be. But invisible deck, essentially, someone takes an invisible deck of cards, they shuffle them, they take one card out, they turn it around, they put it back, they chuck them to you, then you go through the deck and there's one card face down, and it's the invisible card. Now you can do that close up because you can do it here, and you can do it here, but you can also make that into a stage effect. Right, you can play it much bigger. You can get someone up. You can bring on an invisible table. You can, there's gags you've got for it. When you hold the cards, instead of holding down here, you hold them up here, so the whole audience can see them. So then they see the card poking out. So now you can play it to a much bigger crowd. So it's about, and there's plenty of close-up effects like that you can think, well, how can I, how do I adapt that to actually play it to a bigger audience?
So. Did you find those problems when you first started doing stuff on the street, or did you already have that experience from doing close-up in venues?
I think by then, by the time I did street, I came to street quite late on. By then I was fairly confident and good at doing magic in other environments. I was crap at doing street shows. I mean, I was rubbish at it, but I got good at it by doing them again and again and again, because I decided I really wanted to get good at it, and so I stood on St James's Street and just kept on doing them until, and I got a lot of help. I got a lot of help from people, Do you remember Gary Stocker? Gary helped me. Gary, yeah.
Who's Gary Stocker?
Gary.
I do, but in 100 years' time, someone may dust off this SD card and plug it in, and they might not know.
Well, Gary studied law at Oxford University, and then he went to worked for a law firm in London and decided that he hated it and he hated being in a day prison, and so he was going to become a street performer, and went to Covent Garden, and that's what he did for several years, was street performing, and he was really good as well. Yeah, very, very good, very smart, and I still do.
How did he help you? How would one help someone because you've got all the magic skill? What is it you're being helped with?
Gary understood really a lot about the construction of a street routine, and that he'd really studied it and looked into it, and so he taught me a lot about that. I mean, the routine that I do a routine with egg, walnut, lemon, and that came from Gary taught me that. I mean, it existed before that, and there were various different versions that existed before that, but it was Gary that did that before me, and I still do that routine nowadays. I mean, admittedly, I probably do it differently to back in the day when he taught me, and I probably added my own bits and changed bits and that sort of thing. But but that's where that was born of, was from Gary, and so. And I think in terms of lessons you learn on street, it's like what I found was I would do a show, and then it could be, many people used to. I can start listing off street performers. I'm sure you know them all, but for Alex Dandridge and Jim and Matt and Phil and all that, they might just catch a bit of your show and they come up to you and go, by the way, don't want to be, when you do that, try doing this or try doing that or try saying this, and if you sort of sponge all that information, eventually you get better at it, so
it's like it's almost like a workshop, a constant workshop where people are observing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and someone will watch, someone will watch your show, and if you used to have the performers waiting at the back, didn't you? On Magic Corner, that the performers will wait at the back,
Someone's just knocking at my door. Please carry on, buddy. You just carry on talking. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. So that's weird to get. I don't like it when I get knocks on my, because we're both coming to you from boats here, by the way. So usually, if I get a knock on my boat door, it means that I've moored in the wrong place or something's gone wrong. Where was I? I was saying, yeah. So I know Nathan's online, and Nathan's a street performer as well. But you used to get the guys that hang about at the back of the pitch, and and there's like a community there. People would help each other out, and if they saw you do something wrong or they saw that you could improve something, then they give you those tips. So the important thing was to obviously take those on board and then try and improve the next time you did it. Yeah. Who? Oh, your sound's gone, mate. I can't hear you.
So we've only got an hour here together, and
I don't know if you heard that. I get a bit worried. Usually, when someone knocks on my boat door, it's because I've moored in the wrong place or the boat's come off the hook or something.
I got some neighbours, and they wanted to know where they wanted to go for a beer. I don't think they realised.
Oh, nice.
It was a nice thing, slightly inconvenient, but nice. So we've only got an hour here to get together today. So since we're on the last 20 minutes now, I want to talk about Penn and Teller, or at least I want to move closer towards getting to the point of that. So, did you become a prop maker in the time in between what we're talking about before and what we're talking about now?
No, not at all. No. I met. It's quite a nice link actually, because it works quite well. So I was in Covent Garden and I was doing the street performing, and I bought the magic stall off of Marina with a guy called Neil Henry. That's quite a long story bit, so I'll cut that bit out, because that basically captures about 10 or 15 years. But I owned the magic shop, and I was in Covent Garden. I was doing street performing, and Penn and Teller came along with this show, Fool Us. Can you do a trick that fools us? And I never really had a massive desire to be on telly before that. I used to just enjoy performing, but I came up with a magic effect many years before, and I never built it or did anything with it because it would have cost a fortune to do. But I knew it would fool magicians because it had never been done. So when they came up with that format, I phoned the producers and I said, I've got a trick that I think will definitely fool them, and they loved it. They really went for it. And so I made up this sort of really crude prototype. I'm not a prop maker at all. I made up this really crude prototype using a shoebox and a baby monitor and a cheese grater. I mean, it was terrible, but it kind of worked. And then on the day that I was going to the audition, and he always reminds me of this, because on the day I was going to do it fucked up and it broke, and I went, oh, that's it, I'm not going. And Sparky Mark talked me into going. He sat me down and calmed me down in the Africa Centre, and he calmed me down. He made me reboot it, made me go. And he always reminds me of that, because obviously, he now claims that all of my success was down to that time when he talked me into going to the Penn and Teller audition. So I went and did it, and showed them, and they loved it. Johnny Thompson, who's a magic royalty legend, who was Penn and Teller's advisor, absolutely loved it, because he could see. He was smart enough to be able to see what the potential of it was and why it would fool them, because it's not something that's ever been done before in terms of.
So, can I just get a better understanding of what the mechanism, not of the trick, of course, but what the mechanism of the audition is? So they get an expert in.
So you go and perform for. Well, the very first audition was someone from the production company, Penn and Teller's advisor, who was Johnny Thompson, who, as I say, is a magic legend. I mean, he sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but JT was like, a magic royalty, from Las Vegas, many years, everyone, I mean, any magician, bow down to Johnny Thompson, So Johnny was there. And the other guy they had was a guy called Angelo Carbone, who's one of the top magic inventors in the world. Now, that was quite useful for me, because me and Angelo went to the Demon Club together at Davenport's when we were kids, and I'm friends with Angelo. So I didn't know Angelo was going to be there, but of course, by that stage in our lives, he's now the person they've been told they should get in, to consult on this. I can remember going into the audition, and I didn't realize Angelo was going to be there, but of course we know each other. And I said, hang on a sec. You said to fool Penn and Teller. You said nothing about fooling Angelo. I've got no chance.
Because you learned together.
Yeah. And Angelo, can work out everything. So anyway, but that was funny. But no, they loved it, and obviously I had the advantages that I had a mate on the panel as well. So, but Johnny loved it anyway. So that was great. And so, this crude sort of thing became. Then I was like, right, I've now got to get it made properly. And so there was another street performer called Mark Foot. I don't know if you know him.
Pogo Mark.
Pogo Mark. Yeah. He brought the circus with Gary. They had the circus with Gary Stocker and Charlie. Yeah. But Pogo Mark is a great. As it happens, he's very good at prop building. And he's got a workshop in Watford, and he knew what he was doing. So I spent hours and hours with him, sort of building, and he built it and made it look proper for the show. Yeah.
Okay.
But he came to Las Vegas with me when I won the show. because he'd sort of been there on the journey, and he'd
he was prop manager.
No, he would know, but he really did. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it without Mark. I mean, he really helped me a lot on that journey, and he improved a lot of things as well, like just various different things with the method and that, because my technical mind can only go so far in terms of what's possible because I don't know how to build stuff. But Mark actually made some really good improvements to it as well, So it was a team effort in that sense, and he built this really, I mean, even down to things like, I can remember one thing Mark did was I said, right, so this is what I've got, but what I want it to look like a really slick, they're called spider flex tables. If there's any magician watching, you'll know the thing. I mean, and you might have seen on stage, but they're like these sort of really cool, sort of beautifully shiny chrome sort of type tables with like a thin sort of cabaret top and that. They look really smart for stage, And I said that's what I wanted to look like, is like this sort of, the dog's bollocks sort of, super duper. And Mark said, no, forget that. I'm going to make it look like your granddad's old magic table, right? That's come out of the shed, right? Because we don't want them to think that that this is anything that does anything or is super technical in any way. And that was a great tip, and so Mark sort of found an old, instead of making it look brand new, we found an old tripod, and we put it had a few scratches on it. It came out of shed, and we put a bit of frilly shit around it, so it looked like I just bought on my granddad's magic table that had been left to me, so that, and that was Mark's suggestion, and it's clever little things like that, which really made it actually, and threw them off course, because in actual fact, when you looked at that table, it looked so shit that you wouldn't believe that it could actually, the technology that was built into it, Whereas if you'd gone with my idea, you might have looked at it and gone, hang on a sec, that looks very smart, Yeah.
But isn't that the joy of having a creative team? Is that people see stuff you don't?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it taught me a lot as well. I mean, that's very often, even when I did my Edinburgh show, magicians are very bad like that. They try and be their own choreographer, their own producer, their own director, their own sound guy, and a real good lesson is to go and ask people that know more than you about those sort of things, and pull advice from all those different directions, I always say, I mean, I've done been doing a few of these podcasts and interviews with different people, and I always say one of the things that I learned a lot from doing magic was like, and becoming a good magician was watching other performers who aren't magicians, watch people that do other stuff, watch what they do, why is so and so a great comedian, why is so and so a great dancer, and all that sort of, that you can get a lot more inspiration from that than you can them just watching loads of magicians, trying to pick up things from that and read from other sources as well. Yeah,
I suppose that's the whole thing of creativity, is if you can be influenced by something that's slightly abroad from the sphere you're working in, you could be as plagiaristic as everybody else but still be hailed as creative.
Well, they're still like an artist, they call it, don't they?
Yes.
There's actually, I believe it. Yeah. It's a book called Still Like an Artist. Yeah. Which is precisely entirely that. Yeah.
Which is itself stolen from a Picasso quote where it says, "Bad artists borrow, good artists steal."
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I can recall. I mean, it's always funny, isn't it? That they say there's very little that's actually original. And I can remember going. Ali Bongo was a wonderful man, and I was very, very lucky to know him for some years before he sadly passed away. He used to come to the stall in Covent Garden and have a coffee and we'd chat. But Ali was famous amongst magicians for having a sort of photographic memory of magical history and inventory going back to sort of the 1600s. And people would literally, you'd go to Ali and you'd go, Ali, I've got this great idea. What do you think of this? And he'd go, well, actually, Theodore Deland came up with that in 1745. He published it, and you go, oh, for God's sake, and undoubtedly, Ali would be able to tell you who'd come up with it first, But so yeah, but it is frustrating when I see magicians, and not just magicians, but other performers just blatantly nick something off, of someone else's material. It's like, and there's no need to, because you can take inspiration from it and create your own thing or create your own idea, that goes around it. How long have we got? Because I'll tell you a quick story about my Edinburgh.
We've got 10 minutes left.
Okay, yeah. So there was when I did my show in Edinburgh, there was a gag I wanted to do with a gun where you give the audience member a gun and they hang on to it, and then you take it back and you put it in like a plastic evidence bag and seal it up, And basically the idea is you're indicting them into a crime. And I thought I'd asked the right person for permission for it, but it turned out that actually they'd nicked it off an American performer called Steve Bargetzi. So the first time I did it, a mate of mine said, that's Steve Bargetzi's gag. And I thought, right, I'm cutting it out because I don't want anything in the show that I've nicked off somebody. I thought I'd asked permission to do that gag. But what was interesting was that it bugged me because it was a really good gag, and it was not just a gag for that moment in the show. It wrapped in a couple of other bits in the show. So it was really intrinsic to needing to be in the show at that point. And I had a sort of sleepless night of like a few weeks before Edinburgh, the previous, thinking, Jesus, what can I put in there instead? And so I started to break that gag down, right? There's a reason I'm telling you this. So I started to break that gag down. I thought, well, okay, what's funny about that joke, right? Is that, and the funny thing about it is you're indicting them in the crime, aren't you? It's like you give them a gun, right? You put the gun in the evidence bag, you've indicted them into a crime, right? So then I started to think, okay, so how can I do that, but not do that gag? Do you know what I mean? No, but get the same payoff. And so I came up with this thing where, in Edinburgh, I had a projector on a screen. So, and I came up with this thing with at some point in the routine, I get a phone call and they're holding the gun. And unbeknown to them, I've got a photo of them holding the gun like this. And as they go off stage right at the very end of it, one of the Crime Stoppers pictures comes up as they're walking back to the seat, saying, "Wanted, have you seen this person from the Edinburgh Police, holding the gun," right? And it got a bigger laugh than the original gag, right? And it was a really, really funny moment in the show. And it's also because they're oblivious to the fact this has come up. But the reason I mention it is there's a very specific reason why I mention that, is because if you're not lazy and you don't just nick the gag, if you bother to sit and think about it and work on it, you'll actually come up with something that's more original, and it's your own as well. I was really proud of that moment in the show because I came up with that. No one, I didn't nick it off anybody, and I came up with it off the back of going, right, I can't do that, but what's funny about that? Or what's great about that? How can I adapt that and make and do something of my own that incorporates what that's achieving?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I'm actually been researching. I keep getting sidelined by stuff for the last fair few weeks, but I'm actually writing an article about the legality of plagiarism in cabaret and in the arts.
Right.
And what it turns out to be is you can't copyright an essence, but you can copyright the specific order of words that you say something, or the order of actions. So the specific sequence of actions can be copyrighted, but not the essence of something. And so someone can, if somebody takes what you've done and then reimagines it, then you can't challenge them for copyright. And this works in quite well with the idea of slow, progressive evolution of concepts in art. Is we take the idea, we boil it down to its essence, we reinterpret it forward, and then things slowly evolve with the contemporary culture.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's interesting. If you're writing that, there was a very interesting case with Teller in the United States where someone stole his shadow routine with the flowers where he cut it off, and he was able to take them to court and stop them doing it, but not because it was a piece of magic, because you're able to copyright a piece of theatre, and so he sold it as a piece of theatre. So it's very interesting.
C.S. Lewis, C.S. Fields.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's C.S. I can't remember the exact name for it. I think it's something like that. C.S. Fields in the 1930s copyrighted over 30 of his acts, and he was the first.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Incidentally, if you're writing that, and I'm sure you probably have seen it, but have you ever seen the Stuart Lee sketch where he phones up Joe Pasquale to ask him why he nicked the gag?
Yes. Yeah. Very amusing. I've seen a few different bits and bobs about thievery of comedy, and actually I had to draw this article from a guy from Kent University who wrote this article for all the legal documents and all the cases in the US and the UK for the law, and it quotes that in it, and it uses that as a thing of saying that if somebody was then going to take the piss out of Stuart Lee for doing that, and said that verbatim, would that then be copyright? And it uses it as a case example, which is quite interesting.
That's very cool. That's very funny. I like that.
Yeah. I'll send the article after. So we're reaching the last 3-4 minutes. Is there anything you want to say to young beginner artists, people who are just starting in their life of magic or street performance or anything else?
If there's, I guess, God, that's put me on the spot, hasn't it, mate? Yeah, I mean, I would, try and especially nowadays with the advent of the internet, you've got so much information at your fingertips, and I had to hunt out information and find it and work out stuff, And I would say, really, try and value information you're given, and don't get all your stuff off the net, and don't learn off YouTube videos. Try, if you don't, providing you're not dyslexic or you have trouble reading, read books. There's so much to be found from that avenue, and actually try and socialize and go out and actually perform and meet people. Because that's the thing that's being lost a lot, is people sat in their bedrooms performing videos. I know at the moment with COVID it's difficult, but certainly, I think the reason that when I see people who are good performers, it's because they've gone out and performed a lot, and they've interacted with people a lot, and so I would say that would be my advice to anyone that wants to perform and do magic, or any other performance art form, is actually go out and do it. Don't just sit in your room and knock it out. And that's probably change that, probably rephrase that. But you know what I mean, yeah. So
don't be a wanker, everyone, is what he's saying.
Cheers, Matt. And on that bombshell.
Everybody, it's been a pleasure to listen to Lee. I hope you've all really enjoyed it. Lee, thank you for coming down to chat. It's been a massive, massive pleasure. Is there any last things you want to say?
No.
Lovely.
That's it, mate.
Yeah, that was
welcome,
great.
Mate.
So anyone who's been watching now, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Facebook, please like, share, join the group, Whining On with Public Performers. From me now, and I believe from Lee, goodbye, everybody.